Pop culture hot takes are everywhere.
But only one podcast helps you figure out what they really mean.
Stop everything! It's the place for you to unapologetically overthink pop culture.
With me, Beverly Wang.
And me, Hannah Reish.
Find Stop Everything now on the ABC Listen app.
ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Today was all about that base, station, as the focus turned to Erin Patterson's alleged movements. I'm the ABC's court reporter, Kristian Silva.
And I'm Stephen Stockwell. It is Monday the 19th of May, and we've just started the fourth week of this trial. Welcome to Mushroomcasedaily.
The small-town mystery that's gripped the nation and made headlines around the world.
Ms. Patterson admits she lied to police about foraging for mushrooms.
A doctor says he told Erin Patterson she could die without urgent treatment.
At the heart of this case will be the jury's interpretation of Erin Patterson's intentions.
It's a tragedy what's happened. I love them.
Okay, Kristian, so we have just wrapped up court on the first day of the fourth week of Erin Patterson's trial. Can you take us through what we've heard today? Just wrap up the day for us.
Stocky, today it really felt like the theme was location, location, location. Two witnesses were called today. One made a public posting online about seeing death cap mushrooms in a town called Loch. Prosecutors say Erin Patterson went to Loch shortly after that post was made online. The prosecution also called an expert called Dr. Matthew Sorrell. He specialises in mobile phone data analysis, and he talked the court through a really technical description of Erin Patterson's phone records.
Thank you, Kristian. We did get pretty deep today in this mobile phone location journey. Matthew Sorrell was, talking us through mobile phone towers, how they worked, and then basically starting to, trace the movements of Erin Patterson's phone or show us the movements of Erin Patterson's phone. And there were two locations that kept coming up, Loch and Outtrim. This was all during the prosecution's questioning of Dr. Sorrell. What were they trying to show the jury here?
Well, Stocky, in the lead up to the lunch at Erin Patterson's house on the 29th of July, 2023, prosecutors claimed that she went to Loch and Outtrim, and these are two areas where people have made public online posts that death cap mushrooms were growing. Now, we know the broader prosecution case is that death cap mushrooms were used in the meal that was served up to the four lunch guests, three of which died and one survived. So today what the prosecution was doing was going through a very detailed analysis of Erin's phone records and the data associated with it to try to place her at Loch and Outtrim a couple of months before the lunch.
Right. And we saw, a lot of different kind of maps of mobile phone towers. We got lots of lessons on mobile phone towers and how they work and how antennas work. And please don't ever ask me about 120 degrees of antenna direction ever again. But we did hear the prosecution questioning Dr. Matthew Sorrell about Erin's phone being at these locations at Loch and Outtrim. And how certain was he that the phone was in those spots?
So what he said was he could be relatively sure that the phone was in those areas, but he conceded that his analysis has some limitations. His analysis does not give a pinpoint location of where someone is, nor does it explain what someone is doing. And of course, there can be other shortfalls. For instance, if somebody turns their phone off, his analysis can't track where they were, or if the battery goes flat, for instance.
Yeah. In my mind, when this guy was called, I was imagining like a triangulation. I was expecting, you'd have these mobile phone towers in several spots and you'd be like, well, there's this one here, there's this one here, and there's this one here. So the phone has got to be at this point in between all of them. But that's not what we heard, was it? It was just connected to this tower at this point.
Yeah, it's kind of like in the Hollywood movies you see when they try to triangulate someone's location. I guarantee you it does not look like that. And the evidence is not as accurate as what the CIA can do in Hollywood movies, I'm afraid. Yeah. But the analysis that Dr. Sorrell is able to conduct looks at when a phone connects to what's called a base station. And now base stations are dotted around the country. Obviously, in regional areas, they're a little bit more spread out than in the city when there's heaps of them. And he said that what a phone does is it constantly hunts for the best base station connection. He actually said phones are a bit greedy because they're always looking to get the best connection. Now, usually the best connection, according to Dr. Sorrell, comes from the closest base station, but it can also not be the case if, there's an obstruction, a hill in the way, or a building. So sometimes the best base station can actually be one that's, 20 kilometres away.
Yep.
So what he does is he looks at where phones connect to in terms of the base station, and he uses that to approximate the location that someone is in.
Right, okay. This morning, before we started hearing from Dr. Sorrell, we heard from Christine McKenzie, and now she is a former Poisons Information Line worker, someone who self-professed being very interested in mushrooms, has studied mushrooms for a long time. And we heard her talking about how she had found mushrooms outside of Loch. Now, Loch is a location, sort of you're drawing a line between Melbourne and Leongatha. It's on that line. And she told this story about how she was walking there with her daughter under some oak trees, spotted a heap of death cap mushrooms, which she knew from working in the information line, had her interest in mushrooms, took some photos of them, and then, knowing the risks of them, picked them all up, put them in dog poo bags because she had a dog with her, and got rid of them all. And later uploaded that spot and those photos to the iNaturalist website, which we heard about a lot last week. Now, this location of Loch, is that one of the spots that Matthew Sorrell was talking about today?
So Dr. Sorrell's analysis suggested that Erin Patterson made a trip to Loch on the 28th of April. This is the same day that she's said to have purchased the dehydrator, which we've talked about in previous episodes. And that's also about 10 days after Christine McKenzie made a post online about death cap mushrooms growing in Loch. The prosecution also says that she returned to Loch on the 22nd of May. Now, Dr. Sorrell says, according to his analysis, Erin Patterson visited Loch on the 22nd of May. So roughly we're talking, a month later.
Yep.
And he said that her phone was consistently connected to a base station in Loch South for about 43 minutes, which suggested that she remained either in or around the township. So when the base stations constantly chop and change, he said that can be an indication of movement. But if they remain consistent, it points to someone not moving so much. Now, remember this date, the 22nd of May, which I just mentioned.
Yep.
Later that day, Miss Patterson is said to have made a trip to Outtrim.
Right.
And when Dr. Sorrell looked at her phone data on that trip, he said that the phone was hooked into the base station at Outtrim exclusively for about 25 minutes, again suggesting that this was a relatively stationary point. Now, why I wanted to kind of highlight the 22nd of May is that the day before, the 21st of May, one of our other witnesses in the trial, Dr. Tom May, also known as Funky Tom, a mushroom expert, he posted on the iNaturalist website that death cap mushrooms were growing in Outtrim. So what you have here is, someone makes an online post saying there's death cap mushrooms. The following day, the prosecution claims Erin Patterson travelled to that approximate location.
Right. And I mean, one of the things that we heard from Dr. Sorrell today was him talking about this idea of, being in a location for a while and then travelling through a location as well. And we got a huge amount of detail about this. At one point, the prosecutor, Jane Warren, was taking Dr. Sorrell through a whole bunch of different examples of, is this someone travelling through an area? Are they staying in a spot? And Justice Beale actually kind of pulled her up and said, hey, look, do we need to go through all of this different stuff? Just how technical did we get today?
It was incredibly technical, and last week the jury got a crash course in mushroom taxonomy. Today they got a crash course in telecommunications.
Yep.
So again, really, really technical stuff. They were given several glossaries which contained, terms like base station, MSISDN, IMEI, IMSI. SIM card and other information just about how phones connect to various towers. So it was all, pretty dense.
I learnt something today, though, because during the evidence that Dr. Sorrell was presenting, there was the glossary you're talking about was up there, and they had a line about a cell, and a cell being like the area of a certain base station. And in my mind, that finally answered the question of why we sometimes hear mobile phone networks referred to as a cell network. Because I have wondered for decades why that was, and today that question was answered. So thank you, Dr. Sorrell. You've satiated my curiosity in a small way. As well today, we saw a huge line outside of court as we were heading in for the morning. The evidence is getting a bit drier. It's getting a bit more detail as we've been talking about today, but people still seem very keen to come in and check out the proceedings, so much so that people were being turned away. Actually saw, as I was heading into court this morning, there was a couple standing there talking to the security guards asking if they could reserve a seat for the afternoon because they couldn't get in. You can't do that, by the way.
You can't leave a scarf.
You can't leave a scarf. It's getting busy, Kristian.
It is, and it feels like the interest in the case has actually gone up. We're 4 weeks into this trial. We've heard from a lot of witnesses, but people are still fascinated by this case. It really feels like court cases are kind of the flavour of the month in terms of the public interest. We've obviously got this case here, and over in the US, the Diddy trial is getting a lot of attention. We don't quite have the hordes of people outside the court building or influencers posting videos like what we're seeing in the US, but nonetheless, massive interest in the justice system.
Yeah, huge amount of interest, and so it's our pleasure to be able to help you, bring this to you if you can't make it into the courtroom and learn and understand some of the process around this. Kristian, we have continued to get a heap of questions from listeners over the weekend. mushroomcasedaily@abc.net.au is our email address. If you have a question, if you're not sure about something, send us an email. And if we can answer it, we will answer it. Kristian, I'd like to start with a question here today from Amy. Amy and her fab mum, Sarah, have sent us a question. And Amy says, my mum and I have been chatting about the podcast and different understandings of what's claimed by the defence. Firstly, are they saying yes, Erin did forage? And secondly, are they saying she did eat the same meal as the others? Or was it that she opted not to have mushrooms?
Thanks, Amy and fab mum, Sarah. Let's quickly address the foraging thing and what the defence has said. Now, just keep in mind the stage of the trial. Obviously, defence hasn't called its evidence yet, so all we're hearing is the prosecution side. But we did get a little sneak peek into the case that we think the defence is going to argue when Colin Mandy delivered a short opening at the very beginning of the trial. And he said, and I'll quote it here from the transcript, Erin Patterson also lied to the police about foraging for mushrooms. She admits that she did forage for mushrooms. Just so that we make that clear, she denies that she ever deliberately sought out death cap mushrooms. And then the topic moved on from foraging. So that is the only bit that we've heard from the defence so far about foraging. It doesn't go to dates. It doesn't go to locations. It doesn't go to even the extent of the foraging.
Yep.
So we may hear more about that. On to the second part of the question around did she eat the same meal? The defence has never said anything about Erin eating a different meal. That is obviously at serious odds to what the prosecution is saying. But the defence has strongly implied that Erin ate the same meal as the other lunch guests, although they do concede that she did not fall as sick as the others.
Thank you, Kristian. And it's also worth reminding you all that Erin Patterson has pled not guilty to the 3 charges of murder and 1 charge of attempted murder. She's always said that the deaths of her lunch guests were a tragic accident. Now, we have another question here, Kristian, from Natalie. We've had a lot of questions sent in around the source of the mushrooms, so where Erin Patterson bought these mushrooms from or says she bought these mushrooms from. One of them is from Natalie, and her question is about the store that Erin purchased the death cap mushrooms. This seems to be a critical element of Erin's defence. Why has there not been more focus on locating the exact store? We're still hearing it could be 2 different suburbs. If the store sold deadly mushrooms, could the responsibility for the deaths of the guests be shifted to the owners of the store?
Thanks, Natalie. Well, the prosecution says it did conduct a pretty thorough investigation after hearing these claims that potentially dangerous mushrooms were being sold in suburban shops. And they say that the Monash Council looked at the shops in some of these areas that Erin Patterson suggested to various witnesses. So around Clayton and Oakley and Mount Waverley, from the sweep that they did not find any evidence to suggest that death cap mushrooms were being sold there. Likewise with Woolworths, which was another source of the mushrooms in the meal.
Yeah, and we also heard last week from Dr. Camille Truon explaining that she didn't think it was possible for a commercial store to be able to actually gather enough death cap mushrooms to be sold at that kind of level as well. So
that's correct.
Hopefully that gives you a bit more of an insight into that, Natalie. And carrying on our segment, more of a statement, which is when people don't quite send us a question, but it's still worth getting to because it's a very good point. We have a two-parter here. One is from Amelia. Hi, guys. Love the pod. Thank you, Amelia. Me and many of my colleagues, lawyers in brackets, are avid listeners. We do think Tom May misses an opportunity with his username on iNaturalist. Why not Fungi Tom?
I agree.
Great question, Amelia. And we have an example here of another Mushroom Case Daily listener answering a question sent from somebody else. Grace writes in and says, we've all enjoyed seeing the username Funky Tom in the news. You might be interested to know that Tom's username is not just a pun, it's also a reference to the mushroom identification app he developed called Fun Key. A key is a framework used to identify plants, animals, and fungi. I thought that was very nice. And Kristian, just to check this, I've brought up Fun Key. Is that Tom May's name just under that?
That is what is written here.
Great. Thank you, Kristian. If you have any questions for us here at Mushroom Case Daily, please get in touch, mushroomcasedaily@abc.net.au. You can email us and we will do our best to answer your question. Kristian, what have we got coming up tomorrow?
So Matthew Sorrell's crash course in telecommunications is not over. So the prosecution only finished their examination of him. The defence will get their chance to ask him lots of questions tomorrow. Mushroom Case Daily is produced by ABC Audio Studios and ABC News. It's presented by me, court reporter Kristian Silva, and producer Stephen Stockwell.
Our executive producer is Claire Rawlinson, and many thanks to the Victorian Newsroom and Audio Studios manager Eric George. Also, we could not make this podcast without our true crime colleagues Tim Roxburgh, Rachel Brown and Yasmin Parry, so thank you as well. This episode was produced on the land of the Gunai-Kurnai people.
You've been listening to an ABC podcast. Discover more great ABC podcasts, live radio and exclusives on the ABC Listen app.
Hi there, Yumi Steins here, host of the podcast Ladies We Need to Talk. We're all about health and wellness, sex and relationships. If it's going off in your group chat, we're going to talk about it on Ladies We Need to Talk. Perimenopause, fertility, your love life, the mental load, Ozempic. Nothing's off limits. Find Ladies We Need to Talk on the ABC Listen app and all the usual places.